Sixth thing, God will use even the come empty moments. The week before this book was being released, if I'm being super honest, I was terrified. I was having a major vulnerability hangover. I was questioning whether or not this was a good idea. It was too late. It was in print. There wasn't a lot I could do. I knew there were a lot of risks to telling my story, and I'd been told my entire life that I should not tell my story, that I'm not allowed to tell my story. And so I was freaking out. And I was praying all the time, and I was going to therapy, and we had a conference down in Portland, and we came back from the conference, and I had an assignment to preach at a church 3 times in one weekend, so I went to my staff meeting on a Monday, and then I walked out the door, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to write a sermon in a couple days with book launch and all this stuff going on, and I drive home, and I get home, and something overtakes me, and I start just puking, and I mean, every which way. Let's just say my new office began to twin. And it was bad. And I was sick, like migraine, body aches, like something just totally overtook me. And I'd been ruminating for a couple weeks what I was assigned to speak on, which was the foot washing of Jesus Christ. And I was thinking about Philippians 2, where scripture says, Jesus did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. But he made himself nothing, emptying himself, becoming obedient, even to death on a cross. And so I've been ruminating all this, and I'm literally having a moment where I'm laying on the toilet. I can't leave the bathroom because I'm either sitting on it or my head's in it, and I'm not well. And I don't know, I'm thinking, I should cancel this assignment. I can't write a sermon like this. I'm going to fail these people. I can't do this. And the next day, my son called me, Aiden. And he said, Mom, can I pray for you? And I said, yes. And he said, Jesus, what do you want Mom to know? And then he had us sit in silence. And I kid you not, I heard, you're gonna come empty. And I was like, well, I started to laugh, because that's not like really like encouraging, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh, that's awesome, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. But for some reason I loved it. I loved it because it meant I'm going through this for a purpose. I'm actually going to be like this all the way to the end, and I was. I got up to preach on Saturday night, and I didn't know if I was going to puke on stage. Well, I go through three services, and Sunday morning I'm talking to people, and I see this guy, and he's waiting to talk to me, and I, he comes up, and finally we get to talk, and he just said I talked about mess, like our messy lives, and how we mess up our lives, and we're avoidant of mess. We don't want to touch it. We don't want to get it on ourselves. And this guy just comes up, and he just says, I've messed up my whole life. I've messed it all up. I've messed up my family. I've messed up the whole thing. And he's sharing, and I just realized, like, hey, because I'm a woman and he's a man, so I just touch his shoulder, and I'm like, there's other people around and stuff. Don't get weird on me. But I knew, God, I was downloading what I was supposed to say to this guy, and I said, okay, I'm going to say a few things to you, and it's not because you're doing anything wrong, but I have some things I'm supposed to say to you. And I said, do you believe that God does miracles? And he said, I do. And I said, God can do immeasurably more than all you can imagine in your life. God can take broken things and he can put them back together. God can mend things you think are ruined. And so I'm going to pray for you right now, and I'm going to pray that God gives you an image of what it looks like for you to put your family back together again. And so I just pray the same prayer that my son prayed over me. Jesus, what do you want Brian to hear? And he just starts weeping. And he's like, I can do it. And he got an image of what it looks like to get his family back together. And he told me what the image was, and it was this beautiful moment. And then just a couple weeks ago, we had Brian over for dinner because I wanted to check on him, because I want to see Brian's life and family be put back together. So here, Rob and I and Brian are hanging out, and we're having dinner, and then we hear his whole story. Brian says he had a drink, and he drove 4 miles home wife, and he left his 5 kids. And as soon as the prison doors closed, he describes this weight, this crushing darkness of all of his sin and his shame, and it felt like too much to bear, like he didn't know how he was ever going to be able to get out from underneath this. And now his family and his wife don't have him around, and they don't have finances and resources in the house, and all the ways that he feels like he ruined his whole family. And he had a life-changing moment in prison. His mom sent him letters all the time. He reads the letters on YouTube, and they're beautiful. She sent him letters about Jesus. And he says his soul was reborn in prison. And so here he was, and he's telling us this crazy story. And then he's talking about his family and his concern over his kids because he left to go to prison at a time where they needed a dad. And so he started talking about his son. I said, your son should meet my son. They should hang out. I mean, my son's quite a bit older, but you should meet him. And Brian goes, yeah, you were talking about the burger ministry. We're going to go on Sunday night. And I was like, that's awesome. And so Brian and his son show up Sunday night in downtown Bellingham to do the burger ministry. And of course, I call Aiden, and I'm like, Aiden, be in this group. Get to know his kid. Well, they go out. And they're walking around, they're loving people and praying for people and giving people food and socks and all the things. And Brian meets this guy, and his name's Coyote. And he starts to share his testimony with Coyote and talk to Coyote a little bit, and then the next day Coyote asks if Brian can have dinner, and Brian went and met this homeless guy and had dinner with him. And Brian started to share his story more, and he shared about how he was in a drunk driving accident. And Coyote, who's a drug addict, starts to cry. It says, my daughter was killed in a drunk driving accident. And he said, I have never thought about what the other side feels like. And he goes, Coyote just says, I just feel like God is here. I feel like God is here, and I want to go to detox. Can you drive me to detox? And so Brian drives him to detox. Brian killed a man. Well, first of all, I just want to say, it's not because of me, but I came empty. We want to come strong. We want to come put together. We want to come perfect, but actually have to come empty. And when you come empty, you'd be amazed what God will do, because he says his power is made perfect in weakness. And because I got to meet him, then he got to meet Aiden. And then because he got to meet him, then he got to meet Coyote. And now Coyote's in detox, so come empty.